What's up everybody, Greg here with LensProToGo and Lens Rentals, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the menu layout of the RED Gemini 5K. If you guys are just getting into the RED ecosystem or you have a shoot coming up where you're going to be using a RED and need a little bit of a refresher, this video should definitely help you out. If you guys are interested in checking out more about the exterior of this camera and how it's actually laid out and where all the ports and buttons and things are like that, I just did a video covering the full exterior on that, which I'll link to right up here and at the end of this video and in the description below. So check that out if you're interested in that. Now without waiting any longer, let's jump right into the menu of this DSMC2 camera. Okay, so here's the screen of the RED Gemini 5K. It has a very similar menu system to the rest of the RED lineup. You'll notice right along the top, you'll have a lot of the settings that you need to change on the fly. And on the bottom, you have a lot of your status indicators for your battery life, your exposure, how much storage you have left on your SSD card, as well as some audio meters. So I'm going to go through this interface pretty quickly and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the other menus. So in the top left-hand corner, you have your frames per second. If you touch on that, it'll bring up a bunch of options that you can scroll through and in between for all of your different frame rates. Right now we're in 5K 1.7:1 and we can do up to 86.97 frames per second. We can go into our advanced and we can change this to anything within a 0.002 of a frames per second. So you can really set this to whatever you want, and then you can also set up your time base. So I'm going to hit close out of that and we'll just change that back to 2398. Next over from that is your ISO. Again, the same thing. So you have all of your ISO levels from 250 up to 1600, which is the standard ISO range. And then you can flip over to the low light. So here we are with the low light loaded up, and this can go from 1600 up to 12,800 for that expanded ISO range. We'll flip back to the standard range. Next over from that, you have your aperture. So you can see an f2.8. We do have an EF lens on here, so we can change this electronically. If you had a cinema lens or any sort of manual focus lens or manual aperture lens, you're gonna have to do this on the lens itself. So in here, as you can see, exposure is getting darker just as we adjust the aperture, and our depth of field is changing as well. Next over from that is your shutter speed, and in here you can change this from shutter speed to shutter angle. Right in the corner here, it shows you what it is the equivalent of. So 1/48 is a 179.8 degree shutter angle. But again, we can go in here and you can change that to shutter angle or shutter speed. You can also edit this list just like you can with all of these others to make a custom lineup. So if you have a couple that you jump between pretty frequently, you can just have those set up instead of having to scroll through all of these different ones. Next over from your shutter speed is going to be your white balance. And in here you can go from any Kelvin color temperature that you want all the way from, let's go all the way down to our tungsten range, 1700. And then we'll crank it up. It is a little bit slow, which is normal for RED cameras, up to 10,000 degrees Kelvin. And again, there's a lot in here, so you can edit this list down and make it just the ones that you like to jump between. You can also go into advanced and adjust your tint, and there's some presets in here, and auto white balance if you have a gray card or a white card that you want to balance to. Going over from that, you have your resolution. So we're in 5K 1.7:1, so that's using the full sensor. We can go to 5K, which is going to be a 16:9. Then we also have a 2:1 5K, 5K widescreen, and 5K HD. So there's a bunch of different aspect ratio options in there. And then you can go to all of your 2K, 3K, 1K, all of those different options. One thing to note if you are changing your resolution is that you're going to crop in on the sensor. So what it's doing is just taking a smaller portion of the 5K sensor and cropping in on that area. So when we go to 2K, you can see it punches in on the Apple logo there quite a bit. We're just going to back out to our 5K. And then next over from that is our 8:1. This is our compression ratio. So the higher this number, well, I guess the less this number is. So like 2:1 or 3:1 is going to have the least amount of compression and it's going to have the largest file sizes. And then as you go down, you're going to go to 22:1. So it's going to be the most compressed with the least amount of information that you can play around with. Now you want to usually keep this right around in like a 7:1, 8:1, but it really depends on what you're doing. If you have a lot of VFX heavy and a lot of editing and post work to do on it, then you're going to want to have less compressed footage. If you're shooting an interview or something where you can get it right, you can go with a more compressed image and still have a good looking, good quality footage. After that is just your menu, which we'll dive into in a little bit. And this has a bunch of other settings that you sort of need to do a little bit of a deep dive, and you can add some shortcuts. But like I said, we'll come back to this in a second. On the bottom here, we have our record playback. So if you click that button, it'll actually flip it over into the media playback. And I do have some clips on here so you can view all of the clips that are on this card. You can click any of them, load it up, and then once it's loaded up, you can play it back, you can skip ahead, you can cut in and out points, you can change things like your ISO, so you can go in here and change your ISO to make it a little bit brighter. You can change your white balance, because again, this is all just metadata and this is a raw format, so you're gonna be able to change all this in post as well. After that, let's just go back to our recording mode. Right next to that, we have our histogram with our goalposts. If you see on either side of this, there's these white rectangulars that aren't filled in with anything. As you adjust your exposure, either up or down, those are gonna fill in with red. You don't wanna have any red in those. If you have red in there, like let me just see if I can adjust this down. Start to close it up. You can start to see all of that red in the histogram. That means that information is lost and you're not gonna be able to bring it back by adjusting settings in post-production. And same thing if it goes in the other direction. If you overexpose it, the one on the right is gonna fill up and you're gonna have that same problem with overexposed areas. There's gonna be no information and you're not gonna be able to recover it in post-production. Over from that, you have a bunch of data that you can see right here. You have your HDRX, sync, Genlock, timecode, some other little things that you don't really need to worry about. It's basically just a little status area. Over from the status area, you have your SSD, or how much space is left on your SSD. This defaults to percentage and you can change that in the settings, which I'll show you where that is later on. But right now I have 75% free and I have 1 hour and 22 minutes remaining on this card in the format that I'm shooting in currently. You can also format cards in here and eject the media. Over from that, you have your power, and this is going to tell you if you're running off battery, how much time you have left or how much percentage, and it also lets you know what your voltage is if you're running off DC power. So right now we're at 14.8 volts, and we can also shut it down from here, which is how you want to do it. If you just hold the power button or if you just unplug power, it's going to give you a warning later on and it's not going to like that. So we'll back out of that, and then the last thing on this page is your time code and then your audio input. This does have a stereo mic on it, so it's recording internally a scratch track that you can use to sync up later, so you don't always have to slate your stuff now, which is really fantastic, and you can see all of that there. We can also change some settings, whether we want it to be camera internal, rear analog, which is the outlet on the back that's an 1/8 inch jack, or if we want to have a line input, we can change all those settings in here, as well as preamps, headphone volume, all that good stuff. So now let's take a little bit deeper dive into some of these menus. Top left, we have image. In here, we have our image pipeline. So this is where you're going to change to what gamma and recording formats and color spaces that you're recording into. Right now we're in legacy, but we can switch that over to IPP2, which is the newest one. And we're going to get a softer roll off in the highlights with that. And then in here, you can change your contrast maps, your output tone, color space, all of that color information. And again, all of this can be changed in post as well, because this is just metadata that we're recording into it. Going back into the image, we also have our white balance, ISO, CDL, and lookup tables, or 3D LUTs. White balance and ISO obviously are on that first page, so you can change that. You don't need to go into the menus to do it. And then the 3D LUTs, you can import LUTs if you have a specific style that you're going for. You can load that into the camera. So you're actually seeing what you're going to have it look like in post-production. If we go back out and we're going to go to monitoring, in here you have monitors. So this is actually sending out a signal, what you want that to look like. The look around, so this is having like an expanded view on what you have, like basically a surround view, so that you can see if something's coming to the frame before it's actually being recorded. You have test signals, so you can send out audio tone to a on-set audio engineer, and they're going to be able to take that information and then adjust their levels properly, as well as sending out a chip chart so you can make sure that it's graded properly, your SMPTE bars so that your monitor's calibrated properly to the colors, and then the Luma to make sure that it has the correct brightness from darks to lights. We'll back out of that and we'll go into overlays. So this is where you can change a lot of the things that you're looking at, like the percentage on your battery and your SSD. If we go into status, you can turn those on and off here. You can change your shutter speed to shutter angle. You can change it to input and output for your voltage. We obviously want it on input because that's how much power is going to the camera. We can change our histogram from Luma to RGB, and that'll change it just so it's a single color scale. So you see we just have it in a luminance now. We don't have all of the RGB channels, so we can't tell what color it's casted towards. And then we also have our guides, so you can add in your own frame guides if you want to do a specific aspect ratio. If you're doing like square or vertical, you can do that in here, as well as adding in some surround views and some title safes, other general guides like that aren't going to be baked in but are for use for you to monitor with so you can frame it up properly. In the overlays, you also have all of your overlay tools, and this is going to be like your false color for exposure, video, focus, geoscope, which is just another exposure tool, as well as like your zebras, your horizon, so to make sure that your camera is level, and all of those fun things, which you can map to some of these hotkey buttons so you don't have to go through the menus. Over from that, you have your power. Again, this is the same thing as if you clicked on the DC or the voltage on your battery. And in here, you just monitor all of your power input and output, and you can shut down the camera. Going over to playback, again, this just hops into that playback area. You just have to hit that record button in the bottom left, and it'll do the same thing. Back up to menu, we'll go into media. So this just brings up the card. You have the device, which tells you how much space is left on the card, and then you can go to clips, which brings up a quick menu of all of your footage instead of switching over into the playback mode. We'll back out of that. Presets. This is where you can install presets for the camera sensor calibration, as well as LUTs and other ways that the camera needs to operate. This is more of an advanced thing, and if you're trying to do something very specific, but for the most part, you won't really go into this menu. Here is your looks. So again, downloading looks into the camera and then loading those on. Last thing is settings, and in here you have your project settings, which is going to be like your project frame rate, your exposure, timecode, slate, formatting of the camera. You have your recording options, which again is just changing up and setting up if you want to do pre-record, or if you have different ways of processing the frames, what codecs if you want to shoot in R3D, or if you also want to shoot in Apple ProRes, DNx HD, all of those good things. So we'll back out of here. HDRX, this is your HDR recording mode, and this is where you set it up. So we can turn on HDRX, we can say by how many stops or how many factors, and we can also do it on two different tracks, A and X. We have our audio settings again. So again, this is just like clicking the audio meters down in the bottom right-hand corner. We can go into control and we can change those levels up and down. We can change the preamp, headphone volume, all of that, as well as the mix. So in here we can see camera internal versus external and your monitor mix. So if you wanted to change that for what it's outputting to your headphones. Then we have focus, and this is just some focused assist modes. So if you have it on confirm here, then it'll tell you when it's in that spot, small circle, confirm style, and I focus on it. You can see it gets smaller and smaller. And right there. We have that green square. So that is what the focus assist is doing. There's focus, and then you have exposure assist, which is going to help with exposure tools. You have your setup, which is going to allow you to set up all of your custom keys. So there's two on the side here, as well as a couple on the body and on that grip like you saw in the camera overview video. You can set up your date and time, communication, lens data, fan control if you want it manual. If you're doing some stuff with audio and you can't have the fan going on, you can turn it off in here. Going back, and then lastly, you have your maintenance. So this is where you're going to do all of your camera calibrations, your system restores, status updates, all of this good stuff that you can see right here, which OLPF you have so it can calibrate properly to the camera. And that's pretty much it. You can add in shortcuts, which is a super helpful thing. So if there's something you're going to a lot, you can add it in. You can add up to 4. And then you also have your search terms. So if you know exactly what you're searching for, you can just search it. But this is kind of a clunky way of finding things in the menu, in my opinion. So I don't really use it that often. So that's going to wrap it up for this video covering the menu layout of the RED Gemini 5K and the other DSMC2 cameras. If you guys got something out of this and like this video and like this menu overview kind of format, let me know in the comments below, as well as if you have any questions. If you guys want to see more videos just like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.